I don't have to have all the answers, and I'm not going to have all the answers. I can show up prepared. I can be intentional. I can be strategic, but it's not my job to have all the answers.
Hello there, it's me, Steve Mueller, and welcome in to GrowthReady, the podcast that allows high performers to reveal the reality behind what it means to ready yourself for growth, the personal and professional challenges along the growth journey, while also allowing the high-performance executive coach in me to satisfy his curiosity toward what drives optimal performance. On this episode, we have sports broadcaster Jen Mueller on the show to help us accept that we don't always have to know the answers along the growth journey, but that it is in our willingness to stack up the little efforts in how we prepare that will have us ready to capitalize on the big opportunities when they come our way. Hey guys, as we get started here with the episode, I want to just take 1 minute of your time to make a request for you to subscribe and rate the show. For our show to be easily discovered by other potential listeners, we need our current listeners, that's you, to take the time to not only subscribe, but to also rate the show. Whether you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, whatever platform of choice, there are typically ways to be rating the show. So go ahead and click something like that 5th star and be sure to take that additional time to leave a comment or two about why it is you enjoyed listening to the GrowthReady podcast. Your efforts on this will allow our show to be more discoverable, which means we're going to find more listeners and continue to have that significant impact on the community of human performance and personal development that I know you are all benefiting from by being listeners to this show. Please go ahead, take the time, subscribe, rate the show today. Hey, and while you're at it, why don't you share it with a few people as well? I appreciate you guys. Let's get to the interview. Hello there, and welcome back into the most recent installment of the GrowthReady podcast. So excited to be welcoming in a lady who is very much exposed, familiar, and hands-on in the sports world. And so I'm very excited to be able to bring back, as I was sharing with her before we pressed recording, some of the real genesis of where our show began by having some sports-themed discussion. But Jen Mueller joins us on GrowthReady today. And Jen, as I do with everybody before we go any further, I have to ask you this question. What does it mean to you to be growth ready?
It means I don't have to have all the answers, and I'm not going to have all the answers. I can show up prepared, I can be intentional, I can be strategic, but it's not my job to have all the answers. That is always the ongoing process of growth, especially in a locker room where I am asking athletes the smallest questions about a sport I think I know really well, but they will always know better than I do.
So much already right there. So much already right there that I absolutely adore. And I want to start right in this idea of not having the answers. And when you think about how long you've been doing what you've been doing now as a sports broadcaster, as someone, as you just alluded to there, you're right in the heart of pregame, during the game, post-game, in this world that you acknowledge, like, hey, these people know it better than I potentially do, certainly when it comes to themselves and their own game. How have you found comfort around not having the answers? Because we as human beings, we weren't put on this earth to do well with not having the answers. So how have you been able to evolve with that?
Well, I am really diligent in my preparation. So I know that when I go into a conversation or an interview, if I'm in a pregame show or a postgame show, I have taken care of all of the variables I can control on my side of that interaction. So I'm comfortable just kind of sitting in that. There are certainly times where you start wondering, oh my gosh, did I ask a stupid question? Was everybody else already aware of the answer and I wasn't? But in general, I am approaching those conversations with curiosity and with a preparedness level that helps me out. What I have learned is we assume all the time that we know the answer to questions. We do this all the time in our day-to-day life. And I think the number one thing that trips people up, certainly when it comes to vulnerability, is you're afraid of what the answer is. When we get into a tough conversation or you get into that moment where you truly don't know the answer to that question, it trips us up and we want to avoid it because we're afraid of looking stupid. And what I have learned is I can ask the question and have an athlete say, no, that's not exactly right. And that's not something that I take offense to. It doesn't make me go crawl under the rock. It allows them to have the platform to now tell me what happened. And so if I just pose this as a fact-finding mission in our conversations, now it's not about me. It's not my ego. Oh, that wasn't the same pitch selection that you saw in your first at bat. Okay, well, what was different about that? I didn't see it the same way. Tell me what happened when you were at the plate. Those sorts of conversations. You kind of play it out. And I know when I come up short and I'm not prepared and I haven't done my homework and I haven't studied. But in general, you're just trying to figure out what's in the head of the other person.
This idea of the fact finding and that being at the center of the conversation, because suddenly now you've allowed us to see this visually in this idea of, okay, you've got two people having a conversation, but what if the goal of that conversation was simply to identify the facts, identify the story, identify the information that really makes that conversation a success. It's not about this person and this person somehow coming out the smarter or the better or the whatever it is.
Yep.
What you're speaking to here is like how can the communication, how can the conversation be the winner as opposed to the actual individuals that are involved, right?
Yep, that's exactly right. So every time I walk into an interview or a conversation, my thought is I want to give you a platform to tell your story. Mm-hmm. So I can do that in a post-game interview. I can do that as a keynote speaker. I'm just going to open up that platform. I'm also thinking about how many different audiences could possibly be hearing this, because we're not just having a conversation between two people.
Right.
The front office is listening, the coaching staff is listening, your teammates are listening, and the audience who just watched the game is listening, right? So that's in mind. Every single time I ask a question, there is only one answer, and I'm really specific with what the objective of that question is, because my post-game interviews are generally 3 to 4 questions. So in that conversation, the win is, number one, are you going to talk to me? That's the win. Number two, can I get to the heart of what happened on that play, on that game, on that outcome, so that you get a chance to tell your story and the audience feels like they have a few more facts around what just happened. But in order to do that, you can't be hunting and pecking your way around the conversation. You've got to hit those questions right on the money, right out of the gate.
And as two people who get paid to ask good questions, as you and I do, something that I've noticed in my world, at least just from a coaching capacity, is if you're willing to take the time to not only prepare, as you're alluding to, but to almost go that one step further, which I think you're really now starting to hammer home, is that what if this question that we're going to ask is the only question that we get to ask? How do we actually put more weight on the quality of the question, as opposed to, we can be prepared, we can know who we're speaking to, we can know the environment in the room that we're going into, we can know the audience, all these things. And there's so much preparation that comes with that. But what might we benefit from by learning that ability to simply ask a specific question that gets to the point of the objective, as opposed to assuming that we have all this time and all this opportunity to ask as many questions as we want? And I'm just curious, even from your perspective, doing this and how long you've been doing this for, how might one simply go through this process and refine this process of being able to say, okay, I think I've got it. I've got the question that I need to ask, that whatever the outcome, I feel that this is the right question and the right way to ask it at this time.
Yep. So there's a number of different ways we can go through this, but the overarching theme is this. The more specific you can make that question, the greater the comfort level for the person answering. So a lot of times, and you know this from your work on the podcast and from coaching, we rely on very big open-ended questions because somewhere along the way we were taught that that's going to give you the best answer and that it opens up all of these lines of conversation. Right. What it actually does is create a lot of doubt and this confusion over, I don't want to disappoint Steve. I don't know exactly what he wants. So instead of like going out on a limb and me being vulnerable, I'm just going to give you the stock answer and the standard answer I would give anybody in that moment. Yeah. When you're building relationships, for me, with sometimes 80 guys at a time, right? Over the course of the year, at 53 on the roster, practice squad, injured guy, all of that. Yeah. I want to make them feel as comfortable as I possibly can from the outset. So there's only one answer to that question, and they know what the answer is. I don't know what it feels like to catch that game-winning touchdown pass. I do know what it feels like to succeed. And I do know that I would celebrate that, right? So instead of saying, tell me what happened on that play, it might be, how many times did you practice that route before you got to celebrate it with your teammates, right? Yeah. Who's the first person you're going to call? Or which text do you know is first on the list, right? Because I know that that's what just happened. And there's only one answer, and they can smile, and you see their guard drop, because this is not a quiz. It is not an interrogation. I just want to know who you are and what your story is. And so I make it as easy as possible for them to talk to me.
Yeah, I think firstly, I've never been more aware of how good at questions I need to be asking a guest as I am today. I'm just thinking about, I'm just like, Steve, don't let it be open-ended. It's going to be so specific.
No.
But
no. Don't do that.
I'm just kidding. But at the same time, what I love about what you're saying here is that, again, to bring this back now, big picture for our audience, and so to come out of these lessons that you've taken from this very specific world of yours in that of sports journalism, and then to come out and say, okay, so for me, as I go through my own journey around life, as I go through my own journey in terms of navigating growth, if I don't have people asking me the right questions, how can I start maybe even asking myself better questions? Because that's where my mind starts to go with this. If someone's listening, it's just like, okay, I hear you, Jen. I might now be able to ask other people better questions, which can certainly serve anybody's growth journey. But at the same time, I'm almost curious now about how do we just flip this around completely and put the light on us, put the mic in front of our own face, and just say, what questions do I need to be asking myself? And I'm curious just what your journey's been with that.
Yes. So I do a lot of journaling now, and sometimes I'll write down a phrase and I'll come back to it because it will just need a little time to process and figure this out. If you don't know where to start, then I would start with the 5 categories that I use for post-game interviews. And you don't have to have one from every question, or you don't have to have one from every bucket, but here's how I think about it. A post-game interview is truly a conversation about how was your day at work. That's what this is, right? Yeah. So in that, I am going to ask you, how did you contribute to the win or the outcome? What went right? What are you looking ahead to, whether that's the next game, the match, the next meet, right? Which one of your teammates deserves some praise? And what are you focused on between now and then? So if you start with that, and if somebody were to come to you and analyze your day or your week or your project, that gives you a framework. Then what we need to figure out is, truly, are you trying to get the story behind how you feel or why you are the type of leader or what's holding you back from the growth that you're looking? Or is it as easy as a yes/no question? Is it a one-word answer? Do I want to do this or not? There's only one answer, yes or no. Yeah. Now we can dive into the story on, Jen, why don't you think you can excel as a leader with a team of folks that are under 25 years old? Right. Now I can start getting into, okay, what do I do well? What do I need to work on? What's ahead? What teammate, right? It all kind of works into this framework, and it's just to get you thinking the same way you would be if you were the high-performing athlete who reflects on their outcome.
What I'm hearing through that is this idea that we're asking ourselves questions that are setting us up for the next step. And I think that's what's so important is we've had journaling conversations. We've had entire episodes actually based around professionals from that sort of industry. And the one thing that I've always noticed is the emphasis on reflection, rightfully so. That's really what the practice is at heart. But what you're saying here, and again, I love it because it comes from this unique space that you operate in, is that there's always going to be a next game. There's always going to be something that you're moving on to as that game closes, whether you're on the sidelines in a football or baseball game. It's like at the end of the day, the next game is coming. And how do you get maybe through your questions someone to not only reflect on what just transpired, but what this therefore means for them moving forwards? And something that I really need to mention immediately, just from those 5 items that you listed, I didn't hear you say what went wrong, or you probably have the opportunity to get into maybe areas for concern and or growth. However, I find it really interesting the way you position those questions, because you didn't position them in a way where you're able to necessarily just gravitate towards the what went wrong.
And it's not that we don't talk about that, because I do post-game interviews, win or lose.
Sure.
And when you do a post-game interview after a loss, it is a very direct question. What happened on the air in the 7th inning? What happened on the final play of the game where you got bull rushed and the quarterback got sacked, right? Like, it is a very direct question. Yeah. It's not, how did you screw up? Just tell me what happened. Yeah. Okay. So if you talk about, tell me what happened in that moment, what was unexpected from what they showed you on film to how it played out, right? Because a high performer wants to succeed. We all want to succeed. And our natural tendency is to look at what went wrong. In every single loss and in every single outcome, there is still a win that you can find, right? You finish the game. That's a win. Yeah. You might like your bar and your standard to be a little higher, right? But it's there. And so some of it is just diffusing the emotion and allowing you to be analytical about it. And I would say the other thing about this, and Steve, you know this from high performers, it is all about stacking wins. And so when we think about journaling, the other thing I'm doing, I find the smallest measures of success in every single day. Because if you wait for the big moments, you could be waiting weeks, months, years. And I can't stay motivated that long without finding my small wins. And so that's the other part of reflection, is getting you to acknowledge, hey, that actually was a step forward today.
Yeah, and I think your comfortability of just saying, hey, when we start speaking to these areas that undoubtedly we will notice the issue, we will notice the problem, we will notice the mistake. Your comfortability with just saying, you know what, I know that happened today. I saw that happen. I experienced that. But me going to that first to then journal off of that experience might strongly influence the way in which I'm journaling, to where it's maybe limiting my ability to bounce back the next day. Yes. Where it's just to say, like, hey, we know this happened, but the quality of the questions that we now ask, knowing that this happened, will ensure, we'll make sure that when we move on to the next day, we'll be better equipped to make the most of that day, to make the most of that moment. And it is such a slight change in approach, but it's just the right amount to get someone on the front foot, as opposed to waking up the next day and still sitting in that loss, especially in the world that you're operating in. Is like, that's what I love about the work that you do, with you being specific to Seattle franchises there, is that you want them to succeed. You know,
I do.
And so the last thing, you're not helping them succeed in your work if all you're doing is saying, hey, let's talk about what went wrong. Hey, let's talk about where you should get better. Why don't we just talk about this from I want to build that relationship of comfortability, like you said, and then set you up through these questions for you as the performer, you the athlete, to be set up to perform at an even higher standard, hopefully next time, and to learn from whatever it was that transpired the day before. You know, I find that part fascinating, and I've never actually heard it journalistically presented to me like this before, which it's hard to believe it when you see some of the approaches in journalism today, but I love what I'm hearing in terms of how you're presenting it, for sure.
Well, thank you. And I do have the advantage of being the team reporter for the Seahawks. So I have a different relationship with them, right? And working so closely with the Mariners. I will say that when I first got into journalism, I thought that having a heart for people was a negative because that's not what you were taught in school, right? It was taught to be, you are very in the box. You are unbiased. You are not caring. I am just staring at the person in front of me and I'm doing the thing that I'm supposed to be doing. Right. What I've realized is I do have a heart for people. It does come through when I talk to them because I care about you, whether you scored the touchdown or you didn't, right? You are still a human being. And we're all just part of a team, right? That's trying to do the best that we can on a daily basis.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, another part of the way you responded to that first question, you talked about intentionality, and this is a word that comes up maybe every other episode on this show. It's a word that is near and dear, close to my heart in the work that I do as a coach. And so I would love I always like to ask folks from time to time, like, hey, when you say intention through the lens of Jen, not anybody else, but through your lens and your eyes only, what does your approach to intentionality look like? What makes it unique to you, maybe in a way that for our listeners, it could help them even shift and challenge the way they look at intentionality too?
I know how to maximize every single exchange, whether it is one word or 15 seconds. And 15 seconds is a measure of time we use in television. It's 3 sentences. And I know how to do that because I am a journalist, but because when I first got into sports broadcasting, they were not exactly welcoming of women in the space. And I wasn't guaranteed anything more than an introduction, like, hey, I'm introducing myself to you. And that I was only going to get a couple of seconds to make an impression and to show that I belonged. And I wasn't going to get the floor for 20 minutes. Right. And so I count the number of hellos I get in a locker room every single time I walk in. That is my smallest measure of success. Yeah. If you say hi to me, that's a win. And I was intentional about talking to you. If I introduce myself, I have a very specific way that I do that. So I know I made the right impression. If I'm going to sit in a press conference, I might only get one question. That had better be a really good question to show that I have done my homework, I'm following along, I'm paying attention. And I have started to call them my bubblegum moments, right? And one piece of gum, when a coach would hand me one on the way out to the bullpen and I'm tucking it in my pockets, right? You don't notice it.
Right.
But once you start getting 4, 5, and 6 pieces of bubble gum, I can no longer zip up my makeup kit. I'm finding gum in every single pocket of every single coat. And you start realizing that all of those moments in and of themselves don't mean a whole lot, right? Like, oh, it's just one hello. You stack those up over the course of days, months, and years, your impact in these really small intentional ways is immeasurable. And I know because I've heard from people over the last 20 years who have been on the other side of these conversations that I've had. And so to me, when I look at my schedule, when I get in the car, when I'm on a meeting, I am always thinking about how am I going to make the most of whatever small amount of time I have?
How am I going to make the most of the time I have? That is, if there were ever a question that we could use from one episode to the next, that might be it. Again, because for me, the feedback that I get from our listeners consistently is, Steve, like, what are some of the ways that I can be measuring my own performance on a day-to-day basis? And there's always going to be these nuggets as we go through what we do on the show that people can take away. But to actually start looking at time as the ultimate value, and you having to learn that lesson in the hardest way as a female coming into this industry when you did, at a time where it was not necessarily the norm and you were not met with open arms, to then look at it as like, how can every hello, how can every bubblegum moment be that little sign of, hey, my intentionality is being rewarded. And if I look at my intentionality through this lens of how I use my time, well, suddenly now I'm saying, okay, look, when I get to the end of the day and I go through these 5 questions in my journaling, I can quite literally document all the little wins. And I love this is the second time now in response to a question you've used this term of stacking. It's this idea like, how can we stack? How can we show ourselves in terms of how we use our time, that we're using it well and that we're getting the value out of it that we need to get out of it? And so I personally just hear that. It resonates with me on such a level just from a business standpoint, but I think it's going to resonate massively with our listeners because I think it remains one of those areas that we continue to struggle with prioritizing the value that time truly needs to have on a day-to-day basis. And I'm just curious for you, like when I'm saying this back to you, I can see your eyes and your mind starting to go as I'm talking to you. So what is it that sort of comes to mind and you think of some of these maybe lessons and moments over the years where you've clearly learned this in a variety of ways?
So I've learned this over the years, and I'm in a really unique position to see how this plays out. So in a locker room, you get 60 to 90 seconds to talk to these guys. And that's not just a post-game interview. My networking with professional athletes takes place in the smallest amount of time. We don't go to coffee. There's no virtual meetings. We don't schedule lunch together. So I know that if they're going to sit at their locker, I can go over and I've got about 60 to 90 seconds. I know that the number one interaction I will have with them is hello. And nobody teaches you how to do this in school, right? So I didn't know if I was doing this right or not. They just send you in there and they're like, go figure this out. I have now been on the Seahawks sidelines long enough that I get messages from former players who will say things like, I really enjoyed our interactions and I miss our conversations. And I know our number one conversation was hello. I know when they show up and they introduce me to their family, they still walk up and they still say, hi, Jen. I'd like for you to meet my kids, right? I'd like to tell you what I'm doing. We've never had dinner together, right? Like, I know this. I also know I stepped away from the Mariners television broadcast after 19 years, and it was so heartwarming and overwhelming to see people send me messages of encouragement and support and thanks. And there's three things that showed up over and over again. They thanked me for showing up and doing my job. And it sounded like, we knew that we could tune in and watch you every night. That's just consistency and being intentional. We knew that you loved your job. Thank you for always smiling and bringing out the best in the athletes. That's just attitude, right? That's no secret sauce. And number three, you said hi to me one time. I waved to you from the stands and you said hi. And that meant the world to me. And when I was sitting there reading through these messages and I'm crying and I'm thinking, I'm just showing up to do my job. But when you look at it through somebody else's eyes, it's all of these little things that stacked up. The consistency, just being willing to smile and say hi. Everybody does that. That's not just me. Everybody does that. I'm just in a unique position to see how it is received by an entire audience.
Yeah. And when you get those moments along your journey and people are able to give you this insight and let you know this is how you show up, this is how you approach what you do, this is the attitude you have in how you do it, So I think as I'm listening to you explain this to us, Jen, my mind immediately then goes to, okay, instead of us necessarily waiting for that 19, 20-year moment to have this inundated feedback, when you look at how you've established these principles and how you show up and do what you do and the attitude that you have in it, what is it that's allowed you to stack consistently the way in which you do? You've referenced a few things now in terms of journaling and whatnot, but I'm really just curious, like, for you to have that heightened awareness, let's say, of what it means to show up, do your job the way you do, to have the attitude in how you do it. Like, what are some of these ways that you've been able to create the consistency over these years?
To me, I think it is just about being a really competitive high performer myself. Right? High performance looks different to everybody. And I'm not winning gold medals and I'm not the one that's on the field trying to win the Super Bowl. But if this is the moment that I am given, how do I show up in the very best way? How do I show up consistently after working 21 straight days so that people still want to work around me? Right? Like, I get to show up to work, but do people like it when I show up to work? Right? Or am I kind of the Debbie Downer in the group? I also, throughout the day, I find these little games to play with myself, right? Whether it's, can I empty the dishwasher in less than 90 seconds? Or I'm at a workout, right? And I don't have to do what the instructor says. But what happens if I do that one more rep? Right? Could I prove to myself that I can change by walking the opposite direction through my neighborhood. Right? Like there's little games because I know as a high performer what it takes. I'm around them all the time. I know what practice looks like for these guys. Okay. So if I was put in a situation where I had to describe high performance, how do I prove to myself that I can do it? And so maybe it's just this ridiculous game that I play, but all of these little things, and I know that you've had past guests who have talked on this. Yeah. All of these little things are like mind games, and I'm giving myself gold stars. And I'm like, I can do this, right? Because if I can do it in small ways, now I can build confidence to do it in big ways.
Yeah, and this very much touches on the strategic element of what it means to be growth ready that you alluded to again at the beginning. It's this idea of if I am a high performer and I'm able to define what high performance means to me, then through intention, through preparation, all these other areas that you've already alluded to, suddenly now I can step into saying, okay, like what is it I want to do and how good do I want to be at it? And then what does the intentionality and the direction look once I get clear on that? And so I'm almost curious with you, is like, even as I say it that way, firstly, how does that resonate with you? But secondly, I'm curious, when did you, to go back now, big picture over your life, when did you know, like, hey, this is the arena where I intend to be a high performer?
Well, I think it goes back to those really tough days in the locker room. You know, the first experience is in a locker room, and it's figuring out what your measure of success is, because my bubblegum moments don't register for anybody else. Right. You're not sitting with me at 5:30 in the morning when I'm practicing play-by-play. You're not sitting with me when I'm creating PowerPoints for the next keynote, right? There's a lot of things that I'm going to do that nobody else knows about. So how do I measure success for myself? Yeah. Regardless of what anybody else thinks. But when I would go into the locker room, I learned very quickly it's not about proving other people wrong, because that's a really lonely place to be. Yeah. So when I would go back to the studio and I would sit there and think, what am I doing? Like, why am I doing this? I don't need to be subjected to this. This is not fun. It's challenging, but it's not fun. And how far do I really want to push this? And I think that's where it really took hold of, okay, how would you feel successful and accomplished at the end of the day, knowing that all you're doing is slogging through the worst? Like this, it's the worst. For years, it's the worst. And so it was figuring out, okay, how does it feel like I have made a step forward? You know, how can I put a smile on my face after I finish crying at the end of the night? Because my experience in the locker room today was more challenging than most. Yeah. I'm really grateful that that is not my experience now. And I want to be very clear. I work with awesome, awesome human beings. Yeah. But it was started from there, because if I just focused on the experience and how I was treated, I would have been done 2 weeks in.
And that's as hard as that is to hear that you've gone through that kind of thing. Firstly, I immediately relate to it, even on my own journey in this chapter of life, never mind other chapters. But I can almost bet that there's someone listening right now that's going through that very situation as we speak. They're going through what started as a 2 week maybe has turned into a 2 month, and who knows, it could have been a year-long battle now of just it not being fun. And you said that in there. It's this idea, like, there's going to be times where it's just not fun. So I'm curious for you, Jen, like, what work did you have to do specifically, let's say, about the future now, to get so sure, to be so sure that when it wasn't fun, that it was still worth showing up and doing with a good attitude the next day?
I was getting a chance to try the thing that I had hoped for. Right. So there was that. I am just naive enough to believe that something great is going to happen today and probably tomorrow. That helps. But in the background, when everybody would go home at night, I would put myself in the position of being the news anchor, the news reporter, not just the new hire, not just the intern, right? And so if I was doing this, how would I show up for work? And I would use all of the interviews that we got. I used all of the equipment at midnight to 3 a.m. And I would sit there and type out my own sportscast. I would record my own sportscast, and I would go home at 3 a.m. and I would say, okay, I created a sportscast today. Yeah. And I did this for 7 years before I was ever on TV. right? Getting feedback and refining that process. But to me, that was the fun work. So after everybody went home, I found a way to do the fun work. And that was what kept me going.
You're really starting to talk about what it means to simulate the possibility.
Yeah.
And I think that's so powerful for anyone listening to this. It's, again, I'm right there with you. I've been in that same scenario where I've practiced doing things that I'm doing now today when no one was watching. And it made no sense for me to be necessarily preparing for it because I didn't have to deliver it the next day. But what you're speaking to is this idea of showing yourself what's possible or what will eventually happen, but showing that you can do it now. If the moment came today, would I be ready to answer the call? And sure, you're going to continue to refine and get better at what it is you do, but are you still willing to put the reps in now when you can tell that there's still multiple steps before you arrive at this potential destination that you've got your heart set on? And I think people hearing that, it's going to be very comforting for them to know, like, hey, even if it seems as though I'm multiple stages away still, there's still value in using my time today, putting a value on that time to get some of those reps in long before potentially those reps are even needed, right?
Yep. I have never been hired to be on TV. I've spent 25 years in sports broadcasting. I have been on TV for 20 years. My title has always been producer. All of those reps behind the scenes became hugely important when 3 weeks after I was hired in the job that I just left after 19 years, they were like, hey, we need somebody who can help produce this show, who can be the reporter and who can be the host. It's just this one-time thing. We're short-staffed. Hey, do you think you can do it? I have never once, up to that point, done anything like it. But I had 7 years of the behind-the-scenes moments that told me, yes, I could do it. I never looked back. I was on TV ever since, and I did not leave the station with the title of reporter. I was still a producer when I left.
I mean, you are literally speaking to GrowthReady right now. I love it. I love it in every single bit. It's just this, like people often ask me, like, why is it not Ready Growth? Why is it GrowthReady? It's like, firstly, GrowthReady sounds way better than Ready Growth. But
right, that's true.
But specifically, to truly be ready for growth, we have to go through the work of growth. We have to truly decide to grow, to show ourselves that we are, in fact, ready for whatever arrives when it arrives. And so much of what you're alluding to here, and I just absolutely adore the fact that the story has come to this now for you, is that when that moment came and someone was asked to answer the call, it was just like, well, duh, I've been doing this for 7 years. Just no one's been watching it. And now I'm ready for someone to watch it. And that's great. That's amazing. That's exciting. Yeah. But I know I can step into this with at least a level of assurance and confidence that, hey, you know what? I am ready. And I'm glad that they're giving me an opportunity to actually prove that I'm ready, as opposed to them needing whatever they need to see to prove that I'm ready. Like they're going to believe in me. And then I get to show them that I am, in fact, ready when that moment arrives.
Yep. And there's so many small ways we can practice that. So if you're listening and you're thinking, I don't have a project that's that big, or I don't know what I would be doing between midnight and 3 a.m. to prove that I'm ready. Anytime you are looking to step into a larger role, I'm going to guarantee that there's people on the other side of this, right? So if you're looking for a place to start, yeah, you can set new challenges for yourself, whether it's, can I give it up 10 minutes earlier because I know that I'm going to benefit from journaling, meditation, walking, whatever it is, right? Or I know that I need to practice vulnerability. I'm not great at that. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to walk up to people and I'm going to ask a question I don't know the answer to. Or I know that I need to make sure that I am talking about my own success. So every time somebody asks, how are you? I'm going to respond with a very strategic success statement sentence that says, I'm great. And I'm really proud that I finished my most recent sales deck a week ahead of time, right? Like there's all these little things that you can do that nobody else needs to know. But they're building skills one conversation at a time during the course of interactions you were already going to have. Yeah.
No, I think so much of what we're speaking to here is this willingness do the kind of work that nobody else is potentially going to tell you to do, that this is kind of falls on you a little bit. I mean, I can see you nodding right now. That's what you're really getting to the heart of throughout most of this, right?
Yeah. No, nobody has ever told me to do all of the things behind the scenes.
Right.
Once they find out about it, they'll cheer me on. Mm-hmm. But at that point, you're almost just complicit in my success, right? Yeah. And that's great.
Yeah.
But there is the part where you have to identify it and figure out what that is on your own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's what I appreciate about this conversation, is that sometimes we just need to pull back the curtain and expose everything that you've exposed to us here today. Is it because it's nice? Don't get me wrong. What I love about this show is we get to hear every perspective of growth and every story of growth that you can possibly imagine. However, sometimes it's nice to just hear from someone who says, you know what, I've had some phenomenal people that have helped me along the way, some amazing support, and you've alluded to that numerous times. However, if there was a person that I was going to put the majority of my success down to, it's me, myself, and I. It's the person I was willing to be when nobody else was watching. It's the things I was willing to do again when nobody else was watching. And we don't talk about that often enough because we always want to try to acknowledge this person, rightfully so. But I appreciate your willingness just to actually make this discussion more about, listen, this is what I've owned. This is the stuff that I've carried, and I've carried it for a really long time. And it's ensured that when those moments have come, that I've got more years of experience and exposure to what I'm being asked to do than my resume shows, than the video shows, or whatever it might be. But I'm still going to be ready. I'm still going to be ready to answer the call. So I almost want to go future focused now and just ask you, like, when you look at what you've accomplished and what you've done in this world, and it's not just within this sports world, you're doing things now, whether it be in the keynote space, and you're taking so much of your content and applying it to leaders, to businesses in a variety of different ways today as well, which I think is fantastic and makes so much sense. What is it now that you feel you're ready to go and achieve still when you look at your growth journey, maybe forward focus now?
It is speaking on larger stages across states and countries that don't recognize me as a sports broadcaster, that just recognize these are the same concepts, principles, and strategies that help everybody. And being in locker rooms for 25 years, it is a really diverse environment. You get to know people, you get to see them in their best moments, in their hardest moments, everything in between. And I think being there and dodging Gatorade baths and being prepared for the unexpected and all of these things, I think I can relate to people at a different level. I know I can than I could 20 years ago. And I have enough success in my own history that I can tell you that those small moments add up, and I can point to all the different ways. So yeah, it's leaning on not just the fact that it's a cool job to work in sports, but that it's an important job to give people confidence in the voice that they have.
Yeah, I think that is, in closing, I want to hear a little bit more about the voice that people maybe have that they don't necessarily realize they have. I think that's a great place for us to potentially wrap this up, is when I think about everything you've alluded to here, we've not necessarily said specifically, okay, what can this do for how it embodies who you are and how you speak and how you present yourself each and every day. We've talked a lot about the prep. We've talked a lot about the intentionality, but just in closing, I'd love to learn, just when you say the voice that you have, what message is it you're trying to get across to folks when you think about how do I encourage folks to believe more in the voice that they have?
I don't want you to opt out of conversations because you don't think you have the right experience or that you don't have the right words to say. You have a point of view that's important. Sports proves that. Yeah. Post-game interviews prove that all the time, right? The athletes are not the only one with a story that we want to hear from. Your work will never say what you think it's saying about you. You are the secret sauce and the magic behind it. So don't decide that you don't belong before you jump into that conversation. And it doesn't have to be minutes long. You can make the impact one word, one sentence at a time, but just be in those conversations because that's where the growth happens and that's where the opportunities come.
Be in the conversation. I love that. What a wonderful message to share, to just capture so much of what you presented here and provided us, Jen, because it helps us all understand that we're worth betting on. Like we're the one that should be betting on us more than anything. I've said it to so many people from when I started my business, even when I started this podcast. It's just like, shoot, I was editing everything. I was doing everything when we first started. And now we have a whole team and a process and all this kind of thing. And those things happen because at some point I was willing to simply speak up on my own behalf and bet on myself. And you're an absolute proof of what can happen to a person when you do that consistently enough for as long as you've been doing it. And I love now that you're in a position where you're ready and able to get out and tell the masses and help other people see exactly that. And with that being said, Jen, I want to make sure that anyone who's listened to this is like, oh my gosh, I need to learn more. I want to talk to her. I want to connect to her, because how couldn't they after this conversation? Where might we go to learn more and access you?
The best place is the website, which is talksportytome.com. You can also find me on the socials using that handle, and on LinkedIn, Jen Mueller, Talk Sporty to Me.
Yeah, Talk Sporty to me is like, it's fantastic. If you came up with that, kudos. If you have a marketing team, kudos, whoever it is. But the moment all your information came my way many months ago now, and I was reading all about it, I was like, Talk Sporty to me is just fantastic. I love that whole brand, the whole identity. But I think at the same time, there's no doubt that so many of these lessons that you've taken from the world of sport are so apparent in other areas of life. And so if we can all learn to talk sporty the way in which you're trying to teach us to, I think we're going to do some pretty great things individually and also collectively too. So Jen, I appreciate the time. I appreciate the generosity of all these insights, and just best of luck with everything in your future upcoming.
Oh, thank you so much for a really fun and fabulous conversation.
And my thanks again to Jen for joining us on this episode. And let's finish right where we started, in how Jen referenced in her response to what does it mean to her to be growth ready and to find comfort in not having the answers. I have no doubt that there are questions you have in areas of your life currently where you just wish you had the answer. Wouldn't life be so much easier to navigate if we were just handed the answer book and not have to use the question book to get us to those answers? But let's just own what life actually is. And it's typically a big old bag of questions and a big old bag of uncertainty. And we don't necessarily have all the answers. So if we can't necessarily find clarity in what is uncertain, how can we start doing a better job of asking better questions? How can we do the work that's required to be someone who asks quality questions? What if you only had one question every hour? What if you only had one question every conversation that you went into? How much more work would you do to prepare for the quality of that question? How much more comfort would you actually find knowing that even when that question is as good as you can make it, you still may not find the answer that you're looking for, at least not initially? The more comfort we find in the growth journey, the more prepared we become to navigate phases of time on our growth journey where we have to simply accept that we're in a situation currently that isn't potentially changing for some time. But what can we be doing to make the most of it during that time? And it all starts with finding that acceptance of not necessarily having the answers to everything. And that if we can simply prepare for life and the way we ask questions in a way that ensures we're making the most of that time and making the most of this life and making the most of those questions, I think suddenly we're going to notice that we're using our time more effectively. So again, my thanks to Jen for joining us, for giving us this and many other items that will provide food for thought. And as always, my thanks to you for taking the time to join us, to listen to the show. But don't let it be the last. If this is the first time you're listening to us, make sure you're taking the time to subscribe, to rate the show, and of course, be sharing it with folks within your community. I have no doubt that there's information here that can be a benefit to so many other people aside from just you. So don't be selfish and keep it to you. Go ahead and share it with many others as well. Let people know all the great insights that you've been provided, courtesy of Jen and courtesy of GrowthReady. All the best in anything and everything you've got going on. And I look forward to doing this again with you very soon. Bye for now.
Thank you for tuning in to Growth Ready. If you liked what you heard and are feeling ready to grow, be sure to leave a 5-star rating, subscribe to the show, and share the episode with someone you know is ready to fuel their growth journey today. We love our community, so don't hesitate to reach out to us at podcast@growthready.com. And until next time, we are Growth Ready, and you will be too.